our democratic meetings. Please therefore remember that this meeting can be watched anywhere at any time by anyone with access to the internet. There are subtitles available on the YouTube broadcast. These are generated automatically by YouTube. The Council is not responsible for these subtitles nor their accuracy. There is a delay between the meeting and the broadcast on the YouTube channel of approximately 30 seconds. Webcasting officer, please can you confirm the broadcast is now running?
The broadcast is now started. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Will. Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Cabinet Monday the 7th September 2020. Before we commence these proceedings, I can confirm that the Council has adopted some basic etiquette rules for its remote meetings, and these are for ease of reference are: please only speak when the Chairman invites you to do so. Please let the Chairman know that you wish to speak by raising your hand. When asked to vote, please raise your hand. Please minimise all distractions while you are in the meeting and mute your microphone when not speaking. Members may wish to consider turning off your audio to reduce any interference on your audio feed. Please bear in mind that there may be a lag between the speaker and other attendees hearing you. Please quote the page number and slide number when referring to a document. There are no private items for this session. However, members are reminded that it is their responsibility to make sure that their venue and connection is private. If you lose connection at any point of this meeting, please attempt to rejoin the meeting and contact the meeting facilitator if this is not possible. Please only use the chat function for the purpose prescribed for requesting to speak or for a point of order. The chat function is subject to the access to information regimes such as FOI, EIR, but it's also subject to data protection and the rules of defamation and the Council's Code of Conduct. To assist with managing the chat function for this meeting, agenda items will be placed in the chat as markers. The members of the Cabinet are Councillor Graham Butland, David Bebb, Councillor Kevin Bowers, Councillor Tom Cunningham, Councillor John McKee, Councillor Frankie Ritchie, Councillor Mrs. Wendy Schmidt, Mrs. Gabrielle Spray, and Councillor Peter Tattersley. There are other members in attendance at the invitation of Councillor Butland, and these are Councillors Abbott and Councillor Mann. These members may participate in the debate but cannot vote. There are also officers in attendance this evening, and they have a prefix of officers. Officers will only speak when invited to do so. There are two governance officers supporting this meeting. They are Chloe Waite, who is taking the minutes, and my name is Emma Wisby, and I'm the meeting facilitator. This evening, we have apologies from Councillor Bebb and Councillor Mrs. Pell. She has just indicated that she cannot access this meeting, unfortunately, this evening. I can confirm this meeting is quorate and may proceed. I now hand over to the Chairman, Councillor Graham Butland. Thank you, Councillor Butland.
Thank you, Emma. Good evening, councillors. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and people who may be watching on the YouTube. This is a meeting of the Braintree District Council Cabinet. We'll start with one, apologies for absence, which, as you've heard Emma say, Councillor Bebb and Councillor Pell. Item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest that any member wishes to make at this stage? I am not seeing any. Oh, welcome. Councillor Mrs. Pell has joined us, in fact, under the pseudonym of iPad 4. Welcome from where you are. Thank you.
You may lose me, so if I go, don't worry.
Okay, well, nice to see you anyway, and thank you for making the effort. So, any declarations of interest? No. Okay, move on to item 3. Minutes of the previous meeting held on the 13th of July. They have been circulated. Is there anyone who is, sorry, are we all in agreement that they are a true and accurate record of the meeting? If you are, would you just raise your hands and then I've got it. Thank you very much. That's unanimous. Right. Item 4, public question time. There are no members of the public who wish to raise any issues this evening. That takes us on to item 5, finance and performance management. 5A, the recommendation from the Corporate Governance Group held on the 23rd of July, Treasury Management Annual Report. Normally this and the next 2 items would be taken by Councillor Bebb, but in his absence, Councillor McKee will take this item. Councillor McKee, and you'll find it on page 6 of your agenda.
Thank you, Chairman. This item is actually to consider a report which is on page 9 230 of your papers. I have no intention of going through that report in detail. I'm sure you've all read it, but I'll pull out some of the highlights just to make sure they are publicly aware of them. Members at that meeting were informed that the Council's capital expenditure for 2019-20 was just shy of £7 million, which was lower than the amount that had been projected at the time of the Treasury Management Strategy Statement and the mid-year review. The main reason for this expenditure reduction was, in fact, we predicted spending on Manor Street and the Horizon 120 project, which was slower than anticipated. However, it's worthy pointing out that now both those projects are now in their construction phase. The capital expenditure will be returning to us in 2020, and I think the document reflects that. In terms of the Council's investment activity, it was reported the investment balances averaged 63.64 million over the year. This was higher than had been anticipated due to the reduced expenditure on capital investment, as I reported earlier. In March 2020, the Council's total cash balances for investment was £52.309 million. And during the financial year, the amount invested in the Council's pooled funds was increased by £1 million, which was added to the CAMES Diversified Income Fund. The total amount invested in long-term pooled funds was therefore 19 million at 31st of March 2020. When we last looked at this, the COVID-19 pandemic resulted in sharp falls in financial markets, and towards the end of the financial year, leading to a reduction in the value for the Council's pool fund investments, which totaled 16.744 million. However, those markets have got returned to more normality, and they're now the loss of 2.256 at that point is now looking like, by the way, it's an unrealized loss. We haven't sold any of those assets, therefore there is no realized loss for the authority, but the unrealized loss is now 940k lower than the sum invested. It's worth pointing out that Arlene Close, our advisors in all of these investments in the markets, have got us benchmarked against our other councils, and they were pretty favourable on a number of indicators, especially in relation to the credit quality of internal managed investments and the overall returns from income. Investment income for the year was 1.280973, which represented an overachievement against the budget, and that overachievement was £250,014. And David Bebb, the Cabinet member, was very insistent that I raised this evening the fact that overachievement should in fact be returned to balances in a sum of 1.217413 as of 31st March 2020. And that's really in case that the return to market values don't sustain, and therefore we have some balances to cover it off. Finally, we confirmed that Arlene Close would in fact be our advisors for the coming year. So the decision that we're looking at, Cabinet members, is the Corporate Governance Group recommend to Cabinet the acceptance of the Treasury Management Annual Report 2019-20 prior to its submission to full Council. I so move.
Thank you, Councillor McKee. Are there any comments or questions from any members? Councillor Mann.
I noticed, Chair, we've still got a high level of loans to local authorities, 13 million, I think, at the end of March. Are we still comfortable with that level of lending at this particular time? Or are we still convinced of the security of such loans?
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Councillor McKee.
I can answer that, Chairman. Yes, we are comfortable, and the reason we are in close monitor local authorities very carefully against their. It's a computed risk model. It isn't actually a market risk because they don't actually have any risk measures in the market because they're not out there being. Was actually one authority has actually got a risk factor. But they are monitored very carefully, and actually compared to depositing that same sum into the bank, and we are running out of enough deposit accounts to be able to position our funds into safe havens, it's considered by Ireland Close to be a sound and prudent way of getting short-term deposits with a above the 0.25, I think, percent. Trevor can confirm that interest rate in the bank deposit. So yes, we are confident, and we're taking advice repeatedly, and concurrently we look at every authority, and we've even in fact questioned Birmingham, for instance, Birmingham City, which was one that was a very short dated. They're all very short dated deposits, but yes, we are confident that they are safe harbours for our funds.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Any other comments or questions from anyone? I'm not seeing any hands, in which case are you happy to accept the recommendation from the Corporate Governance Group that we accept the Treasury Management Annual Report 1920 and forward it on to full council? Are you in agreement with that? I am seeing that that is unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Then we'll move on to item 5B, which is the first quarter performance report 2020-2021, and this begins on page 31 of your agenda. And again, Councillor McKee is standing in for Councillor Bebb.
Thank you, Chairman and colleagues. As you're aware, normally at this time, we look at our first quarter report and performance. And what we look at is the way in which we're moving towards our corporate strategy and how we've moved towards them. This has not been a normal quarter, as you're probably aware. This has been COVID-19 activity dominated, and therefore the progress against activity annual report are not reported in the usual way. That is not to say that no activity and no progress has been made against our corporate objectives, but the report is entirely reporting on the way in which we've dealt with the COVID pandemic, and we're front and center in some of the activities in that in treating the virus, but also then getting on to recovery. And I just want to pick out, so with your permission, I'd like to pick out a few things I think that would be highlighted to show the sort of work that's gone on over the last 3 months. In the first week, a community hub was set up to take referrals from Essex Welfare. In Tom Cunningham's portfolio, processed 1,394 grants to businesses, paying out almost £1.6 million very quickly indeed. And I think we all know that our local businesses are being very grateful for the support shown by the speed with which we acted. And that was recognised in about the 4th or 5th week, where Alok Sharma, I think, praised the District Council for getting more than 24.4 million in grants out to business in less than 4 weeks. We reduced the council tax by up to £150 for residents in receipt of local council tax support. We held our first virtual meeting very quickly indeed of the planning committee, and so on. I mean, I won't go through them all because in the report you've got them, but one I think is worth noting. In June, Braintree District held the first virtual public inquiry, the first council in the country to do this. So I think there's been a whole bunch of great activity towards the COVID pandemic. That's not to say we didn't continue with some of our plans. Connecting people and places, the pedestrian of that town centre continued. It was stopped for a while, but then quickly got back up to delivering. And some of you have seen in both Bank Street and Fairfield Road, the works have continued in towards that goal of the pedestrianisation. Victoria Square development in Manor Street, that continued after a short shutdown. Kia got back to work and actually are pretty, apart from about 5 weeks behind schedule. So that shows we're moving towards that that goal. Enhancing our environment, waste collection services, other than green waste, we continued unabated, and actually within 4 or 5 weeks, we returned to a green waste collection service without major disruption, but keeping our staff safe. The community grant scheme, which is something that you're all aware of and we continue to be proud of. We targeted that against COVID-related community projects. Horizon 120, again, another project to do with promoting prosperity. That is continued almost unabated, and that's shortly going to go into developing the road infrastructure with an approved budget. So you can see we've delivered towards many of our corporate goals. The one thing I would like to talk about is delivering and innovating. The IT group in this authority responded manfully and delivered actually most of our goals to the way we're going to have a digital council very quickly, and accelerated programs that were already planned, but brought them all forward. So actually we could have meetings like we have tonight, and the planning committee can continue. So we continue our governance operations due to the great work of our IT organisation. I'll stop there, take any questions, and over to you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor McKee. Any comments or questions from anyone, please? Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Chairman. And yes, I'd just like to again repeat how much I think we all support the work the Council's done, officers and staff, in keeping things going. And I just wanted to ask a couple of questions, please. On the recycling on page 41, whilst welcoming the Council listening to the calls to reinstate some form of beverage drinks collections, if the Bring Bank system that's been set up is successful, and I've been asked this by residents, is there any range for extending it to other locations? And second question, obviously since this report was written, things have moved on in terms of the recycling centres run by Essex County Council, and they are now open. Do we have any information on the trajectory on fly tipping? Did it reduce when the recycling centres reopened, or are we still dealing with an anomaly where it's much higher than it was on trend? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Thank you for your remarks. I think both questions I'll ask Councillor Mrs. Schmidt to respond to, as both of those are sort of, well, not sort of, they are in her area. Councillor Mrs. Schmidt.
Thank you, Chairman. The Bring Bank, we've only just started it, so we'll look at it in time. And if we find it is very successful, then of course we would look to see if we could extend it. But we're certainly not actively doing that yet until we see how they're working at present. As for the fly tipping, I have got the figures, but it would take me a while to find them. So it'd be easier if I give you a written response. But the answer is that they have dropped away compared to the height they did go to, fly tips. But I can't give you the exact numbers off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions at all? Councillor Cunningham.
So I just saw, sorry, Mr. Chairman, I just saw Councillor McKee had his finger up. Did he want to respond to any other points that have just been made before I go? Or
did you, Councillor McKee?
I'd just like to complete, because I think I probably overlooked the financial performance momentarily. It wasn't deliberate. I thought I'd just add it before we go into, and I forget to do it. It's on the bottom of page 31. I won't read it, but basically, there's an adverse variance of £919,000, which I think is significant, and it's made up of £425,000, an overspend of £10,000 on services, and other £396,000 unbudgeted items. And of course, with the COVID pandemic, we're expecting clearly the government to step in, but there will be a shortfall of 1.454 million, I think, even with the government stepping in. I think it's just to complete the report, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor McKee. Right, Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to add some comment on the back of Councillor McKee's introducing of the report, and I think it's an overworked expression to say that we continue to live in unprecedented times. This was going to be the annual plan of the first year of an ambitious corporate strategy. I think it's a corporate strategy we collectively as a cabinet were very excited about delivering during the life of this council following the local elections in 2019. as we look at the first quarter of this interim corporate strategy stroke recovery plan, I think we can hopefully demonstrate to residents not only that we will continue to do our very best to ensure services are delivered to the best of the authorities' ability and that residents can have confidence in that, but echoing what Councillor McKee said about delivery regarding our key projects, this authority will do everything it can above and beyond to support not only social and the health recovery from the pandemic, but also the economic recovery as we come out of this, hopefully in due course. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Councillor Mrs. Schmidt.
Thank you, Chairman. I now have the figures I can give to Councillor Abbott and all of you. In April and May, there was an increase in fly tipping compared to this time last year. In June, there was a slight reduction compared to this time last year. And in July, a considerable reduction, 69 this year compared to 104 last year. So it's quite interesting figures, really. It's better than before, so, which is all very pleasing. And even the 2 months where there was an increase, they weren't massive increases compared to last year.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Abbott, did you want to come back now you've got the figures, or are you happy?
Oh, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments at all or questions? Not seeing any hands. In that case, the recommendation is on page 32 that we're asked as a Cabinet to note and endorse the Council's performances at the end of the year, end of the quarter, sorry, as detailed in the report. Are you happy to do so? Yes, thank you, unanimous. We'll move on to item 5C, the medium-term financial strategy 2021 to 2023-24. And again, in Councillor Bebb's absence, Councillor McKee will take this paper, which you'll find on page 67 of your agenda. Councillor McKee.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I won't labour it. You have the papers in front of you. The medium-term financial strategy 21 to 23-24 was agreed by Council on 17th of February 2020, and the level of council tax bandy for 20 to 21 was set at £184.68, an increase of £4.95 or 2.75%. At the time the MTFS was agreed, the anticipated funding shortfalls to be identified in the 3 years 21, 22, 23, 24 were 395, 174 and 334 respectively. This report provides an update on the current year's budget and the estimated impact of COVID-19, an update on the progress of the government's proposed 75% business rate retention scheme and fair funding and 2020 spending reviews, the approach on developing the budget for 21-22 and rolling the MTFS period forward to cover the period 21-22 and 24-25. An option if the government offers opportunity to participate in a bid by Essex authorities to operate Essex business rates pooling arrangement for 21-22, events and issues which may impact over the period of the Council's proposed MTFS, and a timetable to achieve setting of the Council tax budget. I'm going to pull out just some kind of key things I think we ought to be aware of, particularly on the local government funding, the spending review. The government has announced there will be a comprehensive spending review this year, and it's due to be published in the autumn 2020. The fair funding business rate retention, Secretary of State for Housing, Community and Local Government confirmed that review of relative needs and resourcing and the 75 business rates will no longer be implemented in 21-22. The local government finance settlement with fair funding review and the 75% business rate retention scheme no longer being implemented in 21-22, we are assuming the financial settlement for 21-22 will be based on rolling forward the current year settlement, but without funding limit determined for local government, set as an outcome of the comprehensive spending review. We're assuming that the scheme for New Homes Bonus, we're assuming the scheme for 2021 is extended to next year. The business rate pool, we will in fact, if the government approves that, we'll go back into conversation with Essex County Council, Essex Authority, sorry, and if appropriate, submit a request for an Essex pool to be designated for 21-22. There are two key issues that I think are in the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns, I think has been said. One is the European Union that we will be leaving in December this year. No one seems to know quite whether we're going to leave with a deal or without a deal, and it's looking turbulent to say the least, and how that affects our finances, we just don't know. And there's a white paper which we've all heard about and discussed, which was planned for September and is now planned for middle of October. That certainly will affect or could affect our whole funding of the authority. Passing straight ahead, there's given uncertainties about the balances, and I think if you look at your paper, page 78 of your document, at the bottom of there in 5.9, I won't read them, but the general fund balances at the 1st of April was 2020, and the general fund balance 31st of March 2021 is 4.7. And I think, you know, you can read those, I won't go through them, but it's clearly the balances are reducing. And the budget process timetable, again, is in your documents on page 79, starting with this cabinet meeting this evening and going through to the 22nd of February 2021 with a budget and a council approved. But there are clearly some, with some more announcements coming forward from the government, this timetable could in fact be changed. But that's the current plan that we have to get to the MTFS and the budget. I so move and take questions.
Thank you, Councillor McKee. Comments or questions? Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's absolutely right to pitch this report against sort of a turbulent and uncertain background, particularly in sort of macroeconomic terms. But something more mundane and closer to home, I know that we've got to retender insurance, I think, in October, and that's a potential sort of variance in the figures. Do we think that retendering will come as a financial shock to the council?
Councillor McKee.
Thank you. Can I pass that question to Trevor Wilson, who is almost certainly the issuer of the tender and the receiver of the reply? Yes. I don't think it's a shock, but Trevor can confirm that.
Yes, but Trevor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we're obviously going out to tender at the moment, and we're expecting a good range of tenders to come back in, so hopefully they'll be competitively priced. Obviously, there are difficulties in the market at the moment, and that we'll just wait to see. But hopefully they'll be in the right level of the estimates and that. But we will have options to look at if we're prepared to take on risks ourselves. So there will be some opportunity to look at that, actually how much we have to pay. But obviously we'll report back on the tenders once they are received.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Trevor. Any other comments? Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I agree with what Councillor Mann said about the way this is set out and the uncertainties, particularly about potential for no-deal Brexit. As I raised before, looking at page 79 of the budget process timetable, that essentially looks very similar to what we've had in previous years, and it's very welcome because, as I said before, I think BDC does it very well, the way it engages with backbench members. But thinking ahead, if we are facing really quite fundamental challenges in terms of having to readjust services, this is worst case scenario I'm talking about now, can there be quite an early in principle discussion with backbench members about what that might look like if we're having to make very drastic savings, so that we can all be part of that process? Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, I mean, I think clearly, as Councillor McKee said, this is the timetable, but things may change quite a bit. And I think later in the year, as things become a little clearer and we've had the autumn budget, etc. If it looks as if there are some, well, put it this way, I think whatever the result is, we will give serious consideration to an all-member briefing on the financial affairs of the authority so that it helps all members when we get into the actual budgeting arrangements. So, you know, I would give that commitment because I think it is going to be an extremely difficult budgeting year. And the more confident that members feel that they have as much information as possible, then I think the better that will lead to the actual decision-making process. So that's what I would intend to do as we see how things mature in the autumn.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from anyone? No, in that case, there are 3 recommendations on page 70 of your report. I won't read them out, but they relate to the budget process timetable, the Council's participation in the Essex pooling arrangements, and also the arrangements for the Council's insurance cover. Are you happy to accept all 3 of the recommendations? I see everyone's hand raised. Yes, thank you very much indeed. Right, that finishes Councillor McKee's subbing role. He now comes onto the field in his true position to deal with the issue of item 6, the strategic risk management. And this paper starts at page 80 on your agendas. Councillor McKee.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sure you all know, and everyone watching this knows, that we go through this every year, and every 6 months it gets reviewed, and we look at all of the services of the council and compile a risk register. And the risk register is meant to identify those risks that there are many risks that are taken care of in the operational area of the council which are not in this report. These are strategic risks which could in fact impact the very safety of the council itself. And we have a risk register to measure the risk and then put them on a chart so that we are able to have mitigation plans and strategies and the like to look after all those that are called actively managed. This risk time, we've now promoted effectively, if that's the right terminology, all of the actively managed risks to being actively managed, all 11 of them, and because of the COVID-19 has made 3 of them much more likely to occur than we thought before this happened. And those 3 are economic development risk 2, return on investments risk 7, and 8, emergency planning risk 8. And I think it's worth pulling out of the report itself some of those 3 risks only. I won't go through the lot, but you know the sort of work that's gone on to come up with why they've suddenly elevated as risk. And I turn to page 86 of your report, and this is talking about economic development. That's Tom's area. The impact of COVID-19 on the economy of the district is not fully understood. It clearly isn't still understood, but nonetheless, we have an action on top of page 87, an economic recovery plan, and you can see some of the progress to date against the economic recovery plan in the end column. Provided business support for 2,600 businesses and so on. So this is real work in action in dealing with the pandemic by the officers of this authority. And I think our residents can be pretty confident, not that it won't happen, but there is a plan to make sure that if it does happen, then we've got a risk strategy and a ready of a plan to deal with it. And I turn to risk 7, similarly on page 100, where it says vulnerability on the sort of para on the left, but 1, impact of COVID-19 pandemic on the economic climate on financial institutions. We've just talked about the value of our investments going down during the COVID-19 and then, coming back again, and the stock market being quite strong in the last 2 months. However, there is now a recognition that this now has to be factored into our risk management strategy. And again, on risk 8 on page 102, The bottom of this is emergency planning. Clearly, emergency planning is a big part of our pandemic response, and it's added. It says it's been added an extra dimension. But again, on page 103, I'll draw your eyes to the bottom of the right-hand column. Testing of dual emergency response exercise, July 2020. Active response in progress using command structure to COVID. So, this wouldn't have been in this report in March, but since then the report's been updated to take care of the real life. And so now I would point you to the fact that we've now got a riskier environment, but with plans and mitigation strategies to cope with it. So turning back to the report, if I can find it, it's in my papers. The members are asked to agree the updated strategic risk register and action plans for managing the high-rated risks are detailed in Appendix B to the report. I so move.
Thank you, Councillor McKee. Comments and questions? Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Chair. I think we can sort of all support the sort of the three upgraded strategic risks. And I know that we do look at these more often than once a year, but would it be prudent to look at them, say, sort of quarterly over the next 12 months in light of the situation that we find ourselves? These are extremely important risk areas for the council, and perhaps we ought, in due diligence, to look at them more closely more often.
Councillor McKee.
Entirely happy. I mean, let's be clear, as all we go through at a member level and a cabinet level, the officers review them regularly. This isn't only reviewed in time for a cabinet meeting. And the tradition has been that the officers review them and then the membership look at them. If you remember, we have a members' evening where there's a briefing and there's a decision as to whether they think that risk rating is correct and are we looking at the right things and all that stuff. If you're suggesting that we should do that more regularly, once a quarter, I think that's not a bad idea and we can implement it. I'm looking at Trevor to make sure he's got the resources to be able to do that, but I'm sure we can do that.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor McKee. Any other comments or questions? Oh, Councillor Tattersley, you had your hand up. Yes.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Are we happy that the strategy is robust enough if we see the anticipated second phase, which appears to be happening already and is expected to increase as the weather turns colder and the flu season starts? There's an awful lot about the way that we're dealing with the pandemic at the time, but I'm not so sure that I've read that much about if it increases again.
Councillor McKee?
Can I ask Sherry Root if you'd like to reply to that? Because I think it's an officer decision rather than as to what our forward-looking strategies are. Sherry?
So I think we, as you've already mentioned, we're reviewing this on a regular basis anyway. So we meet monthly and there is a recovery coordination group which is considering all of the different things that might be coming up ahead. So we don't just look at what's going on at the moment, but we do some horizon scanning. So that's looking at what's going on locally, what's going on regionally and what's going on nationally and in certain circumstances with something like this internationally as well. So I think it would be difficult to say that that any of us can look ahead and predict what might happen in 3 months' time. But we are doing whatever we can to continue to review that, and then we will put things into place as and when things change or we're predicting things to change. Any big decisions that we would make would be coming through members anyway, so you would become aware of it very quickly.
Thank you, Sherry. Are you okay with that, Councillor Tattersley? Yep. Okay, any other comments or questions? Not seeing any hands up. Okay, it's been moved by Councillor McKee, the recommendation on page 81. Are you happy to accept that recommendation? Agreed. Thank you. Right, that takes us on to agenda item 7, environment and place. changes to the off-street parking places order 2019. Councillor Mrs Schmidt, and this report is on page 110.
Thank you, Chairman. This is somewhat of a tidying up exercise to the off-street parking places order 2019. As members are aware, the North Essex Parking Partnership undertakes on-street parking enforcement on behalf of the partners, and we took on also for them to do our off-street parking partners enforcement as well. We have 4 different items at the moment. BDC, we've got 2 car parks that are coming before you this evening. One of them is the Enterprise Drive car park. At present, it is just permit holders only at present, and we're finding that unfortunately it's being abused, and therefore we need to put this as part of the agreement so that we can have enforcement action taken against those that are abusing this car park. Also, the Rain Road car park, which is the one that looks as if it's part of St Michael's Hospital, that is also our car park. This is free to members of the public between 9 and 5 during the day for up to 2 hours usage if they're going to the hospital. But after that, then again, it is permit only for residents of Rain Road whose parking was displaced when the car park was put there. And again, I'm sad to say that it is being abused, and therefore we need to have the order in place so that we can enforce there. The other 2 are somewhat different. In the past, we have handed over to Coggeshall and Hatfield Peveril parish councils the parking in their 2 towns. Again, they're having a few problems. At the one in Hatfield Peveril, they wish to put in a charge for the season ticket holders, and again that would need enforcing, so they wish to be part of the order. And in Coggeshall, unfortunately again it's been somewhat abused, and they wish to have enforcement put in there. So these legal technicalities, if Cabinet agrees this evening to this, then the order will be drafted as per the law, and then it will have to be advertised. And then there is a 21-day period for people to make any objections. Once that time is up, then any objections would come to me as portfolio holder for Environment and Place, and also the Cabinet member for Corporate Transformation, who would then look at any particular objections to see if they're justified or not. Once, if it has been determined or there's any changes, then we will have to publish it within 14 days. It has to be done very, very precisely because of the legalities with parking enforcement. And that's it in a nutshell, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Mr Schmidt. Any comments or questions from members? No? Right, in that case, there are 6 recommendations to Cabinet. They're on page 111 of your agenda. Are you happy to accept those recommendations? Agreed. Thank you very much. Right, we move on to item number 8 under the heading of Homes, Development of New Temporary Accommodation. And Councillor Bowers will introduce this paper, which is on page 116 of your agenda. Councillor Bowers.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. As members are aware, the council owns 4 flats in Bradford Street, previously known as the 6 Bells Public House. These have been used for homeless accommodation. Whilst proving useful, the property being an old public house does have its limitations on its use. It now seems quite some time ago the council identified a piece of land in Braintree. It has now become clear that it would be more practical and viable for Eastlight Community Homes to undertake this on the council's behalf. There are 4 steps to the approval which are being sought from members this evening. These are laid out in the agenda pages 116 to 117, which I'm sure members have read, and I do not intend to read them out. There are also 4 recommendations laid out on page 117, which I'm asking members to support and approve. Therefore, I so move. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bowers. Any comments or questions from anyone? No. In that case, there are 4 recommendations set out on page 117, identifying the parcel of land, agreeing to transfer it to Eastlight Community Housing, to work with Eastlight Community Housing to identify any shortfall in funding, and approve the final level of investment within the housing capital budget is delegated to a cabinet member for homes. Are you in agreement with those 4 proposals? Yes, thank you. That then takes us on to item 9, cabinet members' decisions made under delegated powers. They're on pages 124 to 126. They are there in the interest of transparency, and we are asked to note those, which we, I'm sure, will do. Yes, good, thank you. That brings us to the end of the public session. There is no private session before us tonight. So without any more, I will bring this meeting to a close and declare it closed at 7:57. Thank you very much indeed for your attendance, and a safe journey